Hello everyone, this is Professor Thomas Noir, and today I'm going to go over fallacies or mistakes in arguments. The first fallacy I want to cover is called ad hominem. It's a personal attack. It is an argument that someone brings up where they're attacking the person speaking rather than their argument. An example of this would be, John claims that fossil fuels are affecting the climate, but John's been married 3 times, so we shouldn't believe what he says. John's knowledge in fossil fuels has nothing to do with him as a person or his marriage, or marriages in this case. You can't turn the argument into something personal just because you don't like it or you disagree with it. The next fallacy I want to cover is called Adpopulum. This is one that appeals to a popular attitude or an emotion. It's not based on fact. Remember, we talked earlier about how important credibility is in persuasion. You can't base your argument in persuasion on anything other than fact. You have to back everything up. An example of this would be, extended warranties are a very popular purchase by the consumer, so extended warranties must be good for the consumer. That is not a valid argument. Do many people have extended warranties? Sure. How many of you have gotten the phone call this week from your car company trying to sell you that extended warranty and have hung up the phone? Think about that for a second. How popular are they really? Just because somebody purchases a lot of something does not make it good for the consumer. Think about cigarettes. Think about alcohol. Think about drugs. Think about anything else that you've purchased that may not be good for the consumer but are still purchased in large quantities. It's not based on fact. It's based on a popular attitude or emotion, and this is not a valid argument in persuasion. Next, I want to talk about the appeal to authority. This is where the author bases the validity of his or her argument on the premise that the argument is supported by someone famous or powerful. Just because somebody who's famous or powerful says something does not make it true. We live in a world where we are influenced by influencers non-stop. Just because someone famous said something does not make it true. You can think back to the last presidential election. Think about how The Rock and Taylor Swift came out late in the presidential election to get behind their nominee, their choice, and spoke about them and how they felt. And then the other candidate then went out and got other famous people to get behind them. You're using these influencers to make your argument, and just because somebody who you like and is famous says something does not make it true. An example here, the mayor said that the crime rate is down. The statistics claim otherwise must be wrong. No, if you have concrete evidence that is credible, you go by the evidence. You don't go by who said what. You go by the evidence that you have. The next fallacy I want to cover is called the appeal to emotion. This is where your speaker manipulates the emotional state of an audience to support their argument. An example of this would be the Red Cross commercial that shows the aftermath of a hurricane with a somber music, a low tone, speaking very softly, and then they ask their viewers to donate money to their cause. By doing this, they're pulling at your heartstrings and pulling at your emotions to get the desired result. The next fallacy we're going to cover is called begging the question, or another name for it would be circular reasoning. It's when the premise of an argument assumes its conclusion. You'll hear someone say, it's true because it is. You can't really argue it's true because it is. An example would be, killing people is wrong, so the death penalty is wrong. Well, not everybody believes the death penalty is wrong, but those same people could also think that murder is wrong. Therefore, the logic would not make sense. Moving right along, our next one is called false dichotomy. It's where the choices are reduced to only 2 options, even though there are many more. A great example of this in this day of age would be, will you be paying cash or card? Well, we know in 2022 there are many other ways to pay someone or pay for something than just cash or a card. We have Samsung Pay, Apple Pay, Venmo, checks, money orders. You can't just reduce it to 2 options if there are many more. The next fallacy I want to discuss is called a red herring. This is where your speaker will distract you with irrelevant points or examples. The example I'm going to use here is a student gets into trouble for not meeting the dress code at her school. When her teacher confronts her, she begins talking about the dress code as a punishment for girls and the boys get to wear whatever they want. Even if that's the case, if she still broke the rules on the dress code, she is still in the wrong. If you are wrong, you are wrong, no matter what somebody else is doing or thinking. You can't use irrelevant points and examples to take your mind off of the fact that you were wrong. The next fallacy I want to discuss is hasty generalization, when the speaker uses too little evidence. Remember, when we're talking persuasion, everything that you talk about and all of the facts that you're going to give is what helps make your argument. An example, a driver with a New York license plate cuts you off in traffic. You decide that all New York drivers are terrible drivers. Now, we may all have done that on the highway, and especially where we live, and have just assumed that. However, in all reality, we know that not all New York drivers are terrible drivers. You're not using really much evidence except for one little scenario. Finally, our last fallacy is called straw man. It's when the opponent attacks one of the weaker, less central argument and just tears it apart, all while pretending that this argument is the heart of the issue. An example of this would be Pamela is the class secretary. She says that she thinks that the class should do more service projects. Mark says he can't believe that Pamela doesn't support the annual school dance. What Mark has done here is completely changed the complexion of the argument. He's taken something that is completely different to the main point and is starting to attack that rather than go after the predominant argument.